Ranadeep Chatterjee. So we are having a ward round and operative scenario today. One of the important aspects of surgical patient management is writing a good fluid regime for the patient. And most of the time in surgical dressing, it's a post-op fluid you are concerned about. And in addition to that, you should be conversant about the pre-op, late post-op, and intra-op fluid management. So we are creating a scenario, and after this, we'll discuss the finer aspect of the fluid management, the volume of fluid to be given, the quality of fluid to be given. So today, Dr. Ramanoj Mukherjee is with me. He's professor of surgery at Abdigot Medical College. So he'll take you through this ward round scenario and the operating session. So can I have the scenario? Dr. Ranadeep Chatterjee is a DNB resident from Barasat District Hospital. We present in the ward round today.
So good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah. See the scenario and then take the questions. You read the scenario, Dr.
Ranadeep. A 45 years gentleman underwent D2 gastrectomy for gastric outlet obstruction due to carcinoma stomach. You are writing his post-op advice. What will be the advice about the intravenous fluid therapy in this patient?
Okay.
So
you will advise about intravenous fluid therapy in this patient. So have you written anything or have you made any slides about your intravenous, your post-operative direction?
I asked about the any slides or I will be able to present or not, but I said that it's only a discussion.
Okay, right. So now in the post-operative advice, this patient has underwent a gastrectomy for gastric outlet obstruction. So you are writing his post-operative advice. Okay, right. So let us start by an important part of this patient, that this patient, or let us start with the pre-operative little bit, because that will be the important background about our intraoperative and the post-operative requirement. So this patient, you are the resident or you are the chief resident and you are preparing the patient for the OT. What is the pre-operative advice regarding fluids and electrolytes that you are going to give in this patient? And then we'll come to the intraoperative and the post-operative advice in details.
Yes, sir. Sir, in the scenario, we are seeing that the 45 years gentleman is undergoing a D2 gastrectomy for gastric outlet obstruction. That means the patient has there is already a certain amount of dehydration, electrolyte imbalance present preoperatively. So in this patient, before going for the elective D2 gastrectomy, we have to correct the electrolyte disbalance and also the dehydration. Sir, we will first see the patient clinically, take the history, and we'll go for some routine biochemical test for assessing the electrolyte status of this patient, and will manage accordingly. And also the clinical status will tell us about the dehydrating state about the patient. So we will also correct the dehydration state.
What do you expect in this patient? What do you expect about the electrolyte status in this patient? In the
sir, there will be hyponatremia. There will be hypochloremia, sir, and sir, there will be alkalosis will be present in this patient, sir.
Potassium?
Sir, potassium will also be, sir, there will be hypokalemia also, sir.
Yes. So that is a full-blown picture.
Yes, sir.
So how are you going to address before you take the patient to the theater? Patient should be optimized before he is taken up for surgery. So what will be your advice for pre-op management in this patient?
Sir, pre-op advice will be, we will first do a routine biochemical test, and we will correct this imbalance, and also we will resuscitate the patient with IV fluid for correcting the dehydration. The amount of it, I will give depends upon the clinical status and the biochemical test.
See, doctor, try to be very focused on that. See, basically, the reason you are preparing the patient is that the patient has lost some salts, has lost liquids, and then or has lost fluids or water. So you are trying to resuscitate the patient to maintain an optimum fluid, that means water, sodium, potassium, and acid-base balance. So
Yes.
say to the examiner, that the first thing that I wanted to do with the patient is that I wanted to resuscitate the patient and optimize the patient for a normal physiology.
Yes.
Thereafter, I am contemplating, this is a big operation. Gastrectomy is a long operation, about 2 to 4 hours. And in this operation, I am expecting the patient to lose blood. So the next concern is to maintain the
Sir,
hemoglobin level,
hemoglobin levels.
to maintain an optimum hemoglobin level. The
Yes.
last part of this is that before I take the patient for an operation, I must ensure that the patient's nutritional status is good, so that in the post-operative periods, I do not expect problems like an hypoalbuminemia, etc. So
Yes.
in the manner of importance, talk about water, then acid-base balance, salt and electrolytes, hemoglobin, and nutrition. So these are your main pre-operative targets that you have to monitor. Okay. Now
Yes,
tell
sir.
me. So let us come back to your question in the same way. So this patient is undergoing a pre-operative preparation. So what is the specific pre-operative preparation that you are planning to do for this patient?
Sir, first we will pre-operative preparations includes thorough history taking, clinical examination, some routine examination. Then we will go for the imaging and also the staging of the cancer stomach, and then we will plan for the surgery, and after proper preoperative care, we will go for the surgery, sir.
Okay. Now, so the first question is that whenever you are talking about the amount of the fluid that is required by the patient, okay, so how
Yes,
do
sir.
you calculate the amount of the fluid that is required by the patient? So let us talk about the correcting the fluid deficit. So how do you calculate the fluid deficit for this patient?
Sir, there are certain way that we can calculate the fluid deficit. First, sir, the urine output. There is urine output, and normal urine output is 1 to 1.5 liters
Achha.
per.
Dr. Chatterjee, I will stop you at this moment. That is your assessment of the loss of fluid or the monitoring parameter of a fluid correction.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the baseline requirement of water for an adult human being?
Sir, baseline is 2.5 liters per day, sir.
Now, see, 2.5 liter per day, now definitely for a 30 kg man to a 100 kg man, do you think the requirement will be the same?
Sir, for normal average built man, it is about 2.5 liters per day, sir.
See, the simple answer is, sir, 25 ml per kg per day. Okay. Because
Okay,
consider that water is a drug or a molecule. So it is 25 ml per kg per day. So if now the weight of the patient is 100 kilos, then it comes down to 2.5 liters per day. But
yes,
if it is less than 100, say for example, this gentleman is 70 kgs in body weight. Okay, so it is 70 kg into 25 ml per kg per day will be approximately 1750 or around 1800 ml per day. So this is
yes,
the first baseline principle that you have to understand. This is what all human beings will require every day.
How do you calculate in a normal circumstances? How do you calculate the average fluid requirement in a person? What are the things you take into consideration?
Sir, according to Belly Love, sir, normal adult male will excrete about 1 to 1.5 liters urine per day. About
urine.
100 to 150 ml water is lost in feces. 400 ml water is lost through respiration. 600 ml loss to insensible through skin. So total amount comes down to 2.5 ml per day, sir.
What you said, 400 from?
So yes, sir.
No, it's combined. Insensible loss to the skin and lungs combined comes to around 600.
No, sir. From skin it is 600, sir.
But it is around 600. So it comes around, if you take a 60 kg gentleman, it comes around 2.1 to 2.2 liters. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So it's not an exact calculation, 2.5 liters in all patients.
Yes,
so taking into account this normal maintenance fluid requirement, plus this patient is having vomiting.
Yes, sir.
And in this background of vomiting, how do you assess that this patient is dehydrated? What are the symptoms and signs of dehydration?
Sir, we can assess the dehydration level from the skin.
Symptom of dehydration?
Sir, from the tongue.
Patient will be thirsty. Patient will be thirsty.
Sir, we will assess the dehydration by the general survey, sir.
Yes.
We can see the drying of the tongue, sir. Yes. Then lower bulbar conjunctiva, sir. Then, sir.
Vitals?
Sir, the pulse will be weak and sir, pulse will be weak and feeble, and BP will be low, sir, and that the patient will be having
skin turgor.
Sir, what is that? What called?
Skin turgor will be.
And skin turgidness will be lost. And sir, the patient will be having oliguria.
Last time you jump to urine output straight away. It's not urine output, that is how you assess your dehydration status.
Okay, sir.
So in dehydration assessment, if you take the good history, patient will feel thirsty, and then you look for vitals. You look for other signs of dehydration like eyes, sunken eyes, dry conjunctiva, loss of skin turgor, and then the diminished urine output. The optimal urine output is 0.5 to 1 ml per kg per hour per day.
Okay, sir.
So now in the background of this patient having some deficit and the maintenance, what IV fluid will start in this patient? What is the quality of fluid you're going to give in this patient?
Sir, in this patient, we will like to give normal saline along with the electrolytes, sir.
Normal saline contains electrolytes. What extra you need?
Yes, sir.
Normal saline itself contains electrolytes. What
yes, sir. But potassium supplements, sir. Potassium and.
When you do straight away, will you combine potassium sodium straight away and start with that, or you wait for something to see?
Sir, since this patient is having long-standing gastric outlet obstruction, so we will give sir 1 ampere of potassium in 1 bottle of NS.
Yeah, I agree. You give potassium, but point is, once the patient is severely dehydrated, patient may have oliguria. So in that case, you should not start potassium unless the urine output is established. So start with normal saline infusion, and once you see that patient is having a optimal urine output, then you add potassium. Because patient who has got oliguria or prenatal azotemia will start building up potassium. So don't add potassium at the beginning. Start with normal saline, and then you go with the urine output. Now tell me, what are the parameters you look at the patient to say, yes, I have adequately hydrated the patient? What are the features by which you say that, yes, the patient is, because that is our target, to take the patient to the theater?
Sir, we will assess it by general survey, sir. Like the returning of the moisturing of the tongue, the eyes will be much more moistured, and that is return of skin turbidity. Then turgidity, and there also will be the pulse will be come back to normal with normal in volume, and also in normal in volume. BP will be again coming back to normal, and the urine output will also increase, sir.
Good. And I think we can go to the intra management with this patient. So you have adequately hydrated the patient, looking at this criteria, and he's going for surgery intra. Maybe the surgery lasts for about 3 or 4 hours. So, Dr. Raman, if you can discuss about how are you going to manage the intra period with fluids?
Right. Now, so let us now talk about what is intraoperative fluid management and what are, so if you have talked to your anesthesia, Okay, so what is their important part that your anesthesiologist is going to talk about?
Sir, first we will have to check for the hemoglobin status of the patient and arrange for the blood in the intraoperative period. Along with, we will also maintain the IV fluid transfusion, sir, infusion, sir.
No, you do not get my point. The main point, doctor, is that, see, blood is a requirement for a specific purpose. Okay. So the main point of asking is that during the operation that is being continued, okay, so the first of the question is that when the patient is under anesthesia, remember that the signs of water loss, say for example, dehydration, etc., are not well understood. Plus, there is an operation theater temperature, which is more or less on an average about 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. So the sweating of the patient will not again be a good one understood. So that means the anesthesiologist is always important part thinking about that what should be the optimum amount of water or IV fluid to be given. Okay. Now, in this one, what is the IV fluid that the anesthesiologist usually starts?
Sir, Ringer lactate, sir.
Ringer lactate. Okay. Why is Ringer lactate preferred in preference to 5% dextrose or normal saline?
Sir, because sir, actually I don't know the actual answer, but it may be due to some lactose acidosis in patient may occur during the operation, sir.
Okay, no, see again, acidosis during operations are those which occur in an emergency surgery. The patient has, say for example, a blunt trauma abdomen. Patient has lost blood. You expect the patient to be in a state of hypovolemic shock. That patient already has a metabolic acidosis. But this patient, you have prepared the patient. You know that the patient has a normal pH. So these patients are this patients, or this is a major group of patients now. The basic requirement is in this modern era something called as a goal-directed therapy. That means the anesthesiologist is or will try to attain a hemodynamic stability more or the less with the target of 10 ml per kg per hour at the rate of crystalloid infusions. So this is if you talk to your anesthesiologist, this is what they will try to attain. If for a major operation like this, 10 ml per kg per hour during the surgery. Okay. And remember that, so but still 10 ml per kg per hour during the surgery is a big rate. That means if you consider that 10 ml per kg per hour, that means for a adult 70 kgs, so it is 70 ml per hour. That means for next 2 hours, this patient is getting 140 to 200 ml. Okay. Plus, remember, as will be the requirement of blood, so this will be a little more titrated. Number 2 is that the main important point is for a goal directed, remember that any anesthesiologist in this era or your generation is always required to tell that, sir, during the intraoperative period, the main management starts with goal-directed fluid. What is lost is technically compensated, and we try to attain, and as I've said, 10 ml per kg per hour is during the surgery. So this is what is important into that, particularly if you are planning to use a vasopressor during operation, and this is what is important. Number 2, there will be a new term that examiners are going to ask you is that what is a zero balance concept during your intraoperative fluid infusion?
Sir, zero balance concept.
Or what is the problem if your anesthesiologist gives excess amount of liquids or crystalloids to the patient rather than a restricted goal-directed approach? Or what is the problem if your anesthesiologist gives excess amount of liquids to the or fluids to the patient during an operation?
Sir, if the patients
if I make it more clear, Dr. Ranadeep, if I make it more clear, You are doing a GI surgery and
Yes,
you're doing anastomosis. And your anesthetist, while operating, has infused about 3 liters of normal saline in this patient. How it harms? How excessive crystalloids infusion during the surgery harms the patient?
Sir, because excess amount of fluid will be causing an hemodilution. So
No,
there
it's
may
not
be an
hemodilution. It's not hemodilution. Something else.
and
I'm not
the
talking of anemia.
BP will increase, sir.
I'm talking of fluid electrolyte problems. I'm not talking of just you are giving isotonic saline.
Sir, BP may increase, sir, due to large amount of crystalloids, sir. So there will be problems in the hemostasis.
What problems?
Yes, sir.
What problem? If you give more of sodium chloride in this patient, what is going to happen? How it harms your surgical patient? What happens to the sodium chloride that is infused?
Sir, due to a large amount of fluid infused, so the patients may the BP blood pressure may increase, and so it is difficult to control the bleeding and hemostasis, sir.
No. That is not that. You try to understand. The point is, if you give the patient excess amount of crystalloid, this sodium leaks out of the capillary bed, and this sodium goes to the extracellular fluid. So what happens in the extracellular fluid? The osmolality of the extracellular fluid increases. That draws water from the cell. So what will happen? There will be edema in the extracellular fluid. So if you have done an anastomosis, the GI anastomosis, there will be edema in the anastomotic line. So this may cause leakage. So one has to balance the amount of crystalloid.
Absolutely. So please remember that again. So too much amount of fluid is thus going to produce an edema during your bowel anastomosis, and you are left along with an edematous bowel to put. The stitches may become loose. This is a very single bottom line thing. Okay, so this is the bad point about giving too much amount of fluid. Now, on the other hand, if an anesthesiologist infuses too less amount of fluid during the intraoperative period, what is the bad side of that one?
Sir, we will lose the homeostasis of the patient, sir. If too less amount of.
What is the end organ damage?
Sir,
that means very simply
renal damage will be present.
Exactly.
Sir.
So that means the main problem about this is that too much amount of liquid is going to produce a tissue edema. Less amount of fluid is going to produce an acute kidney injury or
I have a question, sir, please.
Yes, sir.
Sir, if we give too much amount of fluid, but this this fluid is an isotonic fluid, how can it cross the into extracellular space, sir?
No, it can cross the extracellular space because remember.
Sodium. Exactly. If you give isotonic even, if you give even isotonic solution, if you give these crystalloids, this sodium can leak out in the capillary bed. That happens even in this isotonic solution. If you are giving more of sodium, this sodium will go into the extracellular space to the capillary bed. It will go even with isotonic because you are giving more sodium. You have hypernatremia in circulation. So this sodium will leak out. Okay, then once you are confident that anesthetist has managed the intra-fluid part, they have replaced the fluid lost. And how do you assess at the end of the operation? And you are satisfied, yes, anesthetist has done a good management. At the end of the operation, what you see to decide, yes, I am convinced that anesthetist has managed the patient well in the part of fluid management. What are the things you look for at the end of the operation?
Sir, the pulse rate will be normal. The blood pressure will be maintaining normal. And since it's a long operation, we will be catheterizing the patient. The patient will having a steady urine output, sir.
So these are things you look for to say that, yes, patient is being well managed in the intra part. Now come to this part. You are writing a lot of advice, antibiotics, this and that, and you are writing the IV fluid advice. Now you tell us, how do you decide about the volume of fluid to be given next 24 hours? And how do you decide about the quality of fluid going to be in the next 24 hours? Just stick to 24 hours fluid regime to be prescribed.
Sir, since this patient is an elective case, so all the dehydrations are managed.
I told you everything. I got given you the scenario. You are happy that at the end of the operation, anesthetist has done a good management.
Yes,
and
sir.
you are now writing the fluid management in this patient. You have to have some considerations.
Yes, sir.
In this patient, what were the considerations and how you decide about the total volume of fluid to be given. And after calculating the volume, you decide what is the quality of fluid going to give.
Sir, we will be giving about.
Don't jump to a particular figure. What are the considerations in this patient? In this
Sir,
patient, you need to give the patient his maintenance fluid and the continuing loss. You need to give the patient his maintenance fluid and the continuing loss. In this patient, what do you think will be the continuing loss?
Sir, there will be a drain placed in the peritoneal cavity, sir.
So there is some drain output, number one. Number two?
Number two, sir, there will be some...
You put a Ryle's tube?
Ryle's tube, sir. So Ryle's tube will be, there will be loss from the Ryle's tube.
Yes. And what else is the loss in this patient, apart from the routine loss?
This patient...
Do you know anything about known as sequestration or third space loss?
Yes, sir. Third space loss, sir.
What is that?
Sir, due to there will be fluid collection.
You have done a ditugastrectomy.
Gastrectomy. So
ditugastrectomy is what? Sir. Is a stomach resection plus you need to cauterize the duodenum. You do some retroperitoneal dissections and then you did the operation. So there will be some third space sequestration in this patient. But here, retroperitoneal dissection is not very much. You understand?
Yes.
Here, retroperitoneal dissection is not very much, like a APR or whatever. Yes. So there will be some amount of loss in the tissue dissection plane.
Yes, sir.
So now, tell us how are you going to decide about the volume of fluid in this patient in next 24 hours?
Sir, in the next 24 hours, after maintaining the minimum daily requirement of a normal person plus the excess loss due to the surgery, we will have to give about 2 to 2.5 liters of IV fluid in the next 24 hours, sir.
How did you decide? 2 liters was your maintenance fluid in this patient. So still now sticking to 2 liters in this patient.
2.5 liters, sir. Sorry, sir.
What are you have not discussed the considerations?
No. See, the doctor, the considerations are the patient will require, the output and the input has to be balanced. So this was the concept that you said before also.
Yes, sir.
What are apart from the urine output, what are the other sources of the output?
Sir, the abdominal drain and also the Ryle's tube.
Okay.
Ryle's tube drain.
So abdominal drain, that means catheter, drain, Ryle's tube, and the last one is insensible losses.
Insensible losses.
Okay, insensible losses will mean respiratory loss and sweat.
And skin and sweating.
And sweating and skin. So these will be totally accounted for by the output. So that means your balance has to be with the input and the output has to be thus balanced.
Yes,
okay. So this is the way we start about balancing into this part. Now, what is the fluid that you select for this patient?
Before that,
yes,
suppose you have calculated that this patient needs about 3 liters of fluid in next 24 hours. Maybe you have calculated based on the maintenance and the expected output. Okay, but in the post-op period, there is some stress response in the body, which starts from the time of operation and may continue for about 24-72 hours. So is there any change? Is there any change in the fluid status in the body in response to this stress? Got my point? I said you calculate 3 liters is the requirement in this patient based on his maintenance and the output likely. Now what I'm saying is, do you need to replace 3 liters or you may replace little toward the lower side? And if so, what is the explanation?
Sir, there is a stress. So, sir, The
Because
patient
I always say it's a one-liner. In response to stress,
yes,
all
sir.
the hormones in the body are increased except insulin. So if you have rise of all the hormones, that includes cortisols, that includes your aldosterone,
aldosterone, sir, and
that includes your ADH. So all
yes,
the
sir.
hormones are increased. So net effect of this is there is some amount of water retention in the body in
Yes, sir.
response to the stress. We cannot have an exact calculation how much is being retained, but there is a theoretical concept of some retention of fluid in the immediate post-op period. So
Yes, sir.
once you chart, this chart cannot go on for 24 hours. This chart has to be reviewed every hourly
Yes,
based
sir.
on its parameters. So you may require little less. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we calculate just 3 days of fluid. Now tell us what will be the quality of fluid you give in the patient in the next 24 hours. Out of 3 liters you have calculated, you have to tell the sister, this amount of this 5D, this amount normal saline, this amount Ringer lactate solution. So how do you decide about the quality of fluid to be given? What are the considerations?
Sir, we will compose the entire IV fluid to be given with Ringer lactate and 5% dextrose solution, sir, and normal saline.
What? You are not, I'm trying to, you tell us the distribution of these 3 liters. You are going to give the patient 3 liters of this fluid,
Yes,
total volume. You tell us how much bottle of 5D, how much bottles of NS and the Ringer solution. Because you have to explain everything. You know what amount of sodium is there in the normal saline bottle? That one has to know as a resident.
Sir,
how much sodium, how much chloride? Okay,
sir,
not
145.
No, it's 154.
154
ml millimole of sodium
millimole per liter.
Chloride. What is
Yes.
the amount of sodium in Ringer lactate solution? 130.
130.
It's less. Okay. What is the amount of potassium in Ringer lactate bottle? Is 4 milliequivalent per liter. So it's not very much. So you have to give us a clear idea about what you are writing. What you write, sister will give that only. What are the considerations here?
Sir, we will replenish the electrolyte and the fluid loss along with some.
Before that, now when you go to that, you should now know what is the normal sodium requirement in a person. What is the normal potassium requirement in a person?
Sir, about
and decide.
Daily sodium requirement is about 50 to 60 millimole per day, sir.
Is it? So less.
50 to 60 millimole per day.
No, it is
2
millimole
90
per kg per day.
See,
2
it is always
per kg per day is a sodium requirement. 1 millimole per kg per day is a potassium requirement.
It is the potassium requirement, exactly.
Okay. So if you calculate this patient on maintenance required about 120 of sodium, and then you have a drain which might be draining some amount of peritoneal fluid or some amount of blood, you have a right tube. So you have to take into account this extra loss of sodium. And what I'm saying is this stress response. In the background of this stress response, in response to aldosterone, there is some retention of sodium in the kidneys. So what your requirement is partly is being taken care of by the aldosterone response in the immediate post-op period. So there will be some amount of retention. Number one. What about potassium in your prescription in the first 24 hours?
Sir,
lactate because you want to add some potassium.
1 millimole.
We are talking of first 24 hours fluid, not late post-op fluid management.
Sir, the daily requirement is 1 millimole per kg.
Tell me, will you write potassium in the first 24 hours prescription?
See, very important question, doctor. This is what you were asked in a ward round. So, as sir has told you, in the first 24 hours, this patient has undergone a major operation, means major tissue trauma. So, what do you think? Will the potassium requirement be normal less than normal, more than normal?
Sir, more than normal, sir.
Yes. So in the first 24, 48 hours, you don't require to give this potassium because tissue trauma causes cell death, and this causes release of potassium. So unless patient has got a porous P of deficit, you don't need to give the patient potassium. Clear?
Absolutely.
So you need to give the patient sodium. Agreed. So
Yes,
how
sir.
do you distribute the fluid now? Out of 3 liters? Out of 3 liters, how do you distribute the fluid now?
See, in the first 24 hours, what did sir say in the beginning of this discussion when you talked about tissue trauma? Any tissue trauma produces release of which hormone? Cortisol.
Cortisol,
Okay.
sir.
And number one is cortisol. Any other hormone that is released as a part of stress response is antidiuretic hormone. Please remember aldosterone and antidiuretic hormones. That means the basic motto of the story is in the first 24 to 48 hours of the trauma, that means a major operation, the body is trying to conserve water and sodium. Please remember. So that means particularly sodium is being retained, or the body is trying to conserve the sodium. So this is the first point to remember, that the body is trying to retain the sodium by the water or the fluid conservation. So what is your first choice of fluid in the first 24 hours?
Sir, we will
So
give...
you have a ration of 6 bottles of fluid. You have decided to give the patient 3 liters of fluid. So out of 6 bottles, what will be your writings? Okay, you are not sure about it. I can just give an outline that patient who is in the immediate post-op period is in the bed. He is not moving around. His basic metabolic functions will continue, which will be his brain function, his musculoskeletal function, his kidney function, okay, his respiratory function. So to maintain this basic metabolic function, everyone needs some dextrose or glucose to provide the calorie. And on an average, a patient who is 70 kg, he needs about 400 kilocalorie of energy to maintain these basic vital functions. So always keep in mind that you need to give this patient dextrose in the immediate post-op period. And the optimal dextrose will be about 100 grams. If you give the patient 100 grams of dextrose, that will provide you 400 kilocalorie of energy. Suppose as an error, you have not written dextrose. You have just given ringer lactate, and that many people write. Keep on writing normal saline, ringer lactate, 1:1, continue for 24 hours. What is the harm?
So
it's going to happen in this patient. If you write only electrolytes and not any amount of dextrose in the immediate post-op period.
So the patient will having energy deficit.
He will not have energy deficit all the time, because that is how you are going through.
Now, if no dextrose is added,
what will happen? He will still manage. Our body has tremendous reserve.
The patient is in fasting state, sir. So the patient, so there will be more catabolic hormones are released.
No. Try to understand. If you are not giving this to the dextrose, patient will mobilize dextrose from the glycogen stored in the liver first.
Yes,
so the glycogen stored in the liver will be utilized to get dextrose. If you are still not giving, once the liver glycogen is exhausted, body will utilize the muscle glycogen.
Yes, sir.
And maybe 2 days down the line, you are still not giving dextrose, then the protein and the fat stored in the body will be mobilized.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So patient is not getting very severe coming at the immediate post-op period. But you should always keep in mind that once you are writing in the immediate post-op fluid management, you should consider to give the patient some amount of dextrose, so that this can supply the basic calorie requirement for the normal vital function, normal basal vital functions.
Yes.
And then comes the electrolytes.
Yes.
Once you have a good calculation of the normal sodium requirement and the containing loss and the net sodium retention because of the stress response, you have to calculate in between. But finally, this is based on your electrolyte estimations. You do electrolyte estimation and then you decide the status and the maintenance. So now tell me, out of these 6 bottles, what are your advice?
So there will be 2 bottles of dextrose saline given of this 6 bottle, and the remaining 4 bottle will we will calculate the sodium requirement and potassium requirement, and we will give the
again you are confusing.
Again, doctor.
You are writing the 24 hours advice. You have already given the patient 2 bottles of dextrose saline. That means you already given the patient 150 millimole of sodium. And what is left behind? You need more sodium.
See, doctor, you are not understanding the concept. Scenario. See, you are not understanding the concept. See, the concept is very straight. In the major operation that you do, cells are injured and potassium is getting mixed in the blood. Okay? Have you understood up till this point?
Yes,
now, if that potassium is coming in the blood, who is taking that potassium out from the body? The kidneys. Okay?
Kidneys.
The kidneys. Yes, the kidneys are going to take that potassium out that has come out of the trauma of the operation. Now, the patient may develop an hypotension in the first 24 hours, bleeding, etc.
Yes, sir.
So your kidneys may not work that properly. And also there is a problem of that hormone that is released that decreases the urine output. Yes. So that means in the first 24 hours, already the body has a problem of kicking out the excess potassium that came in circulation. Did you understand up till this point?
Yes.
That means if you are now giving more potassium to the body in the first 24 hours, do you understand how dangerous that can be?
Yes, sir.
Particularly if the patient has a low urine output.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so please remember, until and unless you are operating on a patient who has gross hypokalemia, that means less than 2.5, or the patient shows intraoperative hypokalemia or postoperative hypokalemia is detected in the first 24 to 48 hours, unnecessarily do not supplement potassium in the first 24 to 48 hours. Because as I have said, let the body kick out the excess amount of potassium that came out into the blood. Did you understand up till this point?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now talk about
right. And about sodium. Clear?
Now about the sodium. Now about
normal requirement is 120 if the patient is 60 kg. And then you can take into account the extra sodium expected to be lost in right spirit or in the drain side. So you can calculate initially about 154. So 1 liter of normal saline is good enough to replace 150 millimole of sodium.
That's it.
So don't add 2 liters of sodium. That will pump you 300 millimole of sodium.
Yes, sir.
So in this patient, and that's why I'm asking you, you consider giving the patient 5% dextrose, maybe 4 bottles, and 1 liter of saline. You do not get ring-elected in this patient. You don't need potassium. 4 millimole potassium is very small amount, but still it's not required. Okay. Now come to the ward. You are in the first post-op day. You came for a round in the next post-op morning. And apart from other things in this patient, I'm just confirming the fluid management part. How do you assess the patient in the first post-op day and now write your second 24 hours post-op advice? What are the things you look for in the ward in the first post-op day in this patient and decide about your fluid management? I'm not talking of the other part. There are a lot of things in this patient to manage, but you just confine to the fluid part.
Sir, first post-op day, I will first ask the talk to the patient and will know, and I will want to know if he's suffering from any discomfort or problems, and then we'll go to the clinical survey of like general survey of the patient.
You will ask him whether he's feeling thirsty or not.
Yes, sir. I will ask that.
So you ask the patient whether he is feeling normal, whether he's feeling thirsty or not. So
yes, sir. I told it. No, I will ask the patient if he or she has any problem.
Yeah.
See, Dr. Chatterjee. See, yes, important thing, sir. say to the examiner, sir, the assessment of the patient is for fluid loss and fluid excess.
Yes,
What are the clinical signs of fluid loss that you see? Then you talk about excess.
Sir, we will ask the patient first if he is thirsty or not. And,
number one. Number two.
And
anything more? Okay. Sir, for a patient on a post-operative period, thirst. What are the points that you see in your chart or the daily monitoring chart or the bed ticket, etc., to say that the patient
look for the constant BP of the patient when that is measured in a routine interval. We will also see the pulse rate of the patient, and we will see the hourly urine output of the patient and the amount of drain or Ryle's tube collection that has been.
No. Again, you don't digress from the topic. The question is very simple. How do you know that the patient is fluid deficit? Number one, patient is thirsty. Patient may be confused. Sir, the skin turgor is decreased.
And sir, the
tongue is dry. Urine output is less than 30 ml per hour.
Yes, sir.
Patient has tachycardia and may have a postural hypotension. The routine monitoring of blood pressure may not help. So these are the signs of low fluid. That means patient needs more fluid. Now tell me the other side of the story. How do you understand on the POD2 that you have given too much amount of fluid? Excess fluid.
So the patient is having no signs of the dehydration, sir.
Again, see,
there is something reverse. There is something reverse of dehydration feature.
If he is retaining fluid, so the patient has a heart problem.
Sir, edema, sir.
Where do you see edema in these patients?
Sir, these we will the sacral edema will be present, sir.
Before edema, general appearance.
General appearance, face.
Patient may look puffy. Patient may look puffy. Patient may have conjunctival edema.
Yes, sir.
Patient may have conjunctival edema.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and on auscultation, that is everything that you do every morning. When you put a stethoscope to the chest, what do you hear?
Crepitation, sir.
Very good. Okay, so you hear crepitations, right? And if you are using a 5% dextrose, what can be the rare problem of use of 5% dextrose? Remember, 5% dextrose is technically hypoosmotic. It is not iso. It is not hyper or iso. The glucose is eaten away by RBC. It is thus only free water. So rarely the patient may be confused or drowsy. But remember, those are rare things. Common things, as Sarah said, is the puffy face. Remember, and when you auscultate the chest, there may be signs of crepitations.
Okay, so now calculate the volume of fluid required for the next 24 hours. Calculate.
Exactly. That means the second post-op day.
So we will maintain the daily fluid loss, sir.
You have the chart in front of you. Now decide. You have the chart of previous day input, previous day output. If you have the previous day drain output, Ryle's tube output, everything is in front of you.
Yes, sir. Sir, total urine output, sir.
Yes.
Plus,
plus
600 to 900 ml, sir.
Okay. Don't make a range. Either take 600 if the patient is a good AC room or he is sweating. There is a very hot, humid atmosphere. Take 900, but take 600. Agreed. So urine output plus 600 plus
the drain and
yes, drain is 400 ml drain plus 400.
Yes, sir. Drain and Ryle's tube, sir.
Ryle's tube 300.
Yes, sir.
So I am giving you a scenario. Patient has got 1400 urine. You take 600 for the loss.
Yes, sir.
With 2 liters, 400 in the drain, 2.4, and 400 in Ryle's tube aspirate. So 2.8 liters is the
2.8 liters.
You have calculated now. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So that is how you go about calculation of fluid to be required in the first post-op day or second post-op day. So decide about the volume. Now decide about the quality of fluid. What they're going to give in the, if you are in the first post-op day round, again, the stress response is still continuing.
Yes, sir.
That means this patient is having this stress response and there will be some amount of fluid being retained in the body. So whatever if I 2.8, you can go little less, should not go beyond that.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Number one. Number two, now again, the potassium level, which has gone higher in the immediate post-op scenario, may remain higher till 48 hours. So you can have a lab estimation of your electrolytes.
Yes, sir.
What is the status? Otherwise, if you don't estimate, you can skip giving the patient potassium even in the first post-op day.
Yes, sir.
So how do you calculate sodium in this patient now? I have given you a scenario 400 ml of drain and 400 ml of rise to aspirate. How much sodium has this patient lost in the extra? If the drain contains a serous sanguineous fluid, what is the sodium content in the drain fluid?
So drain fluid, the drain fluid is actually isotonic to the body.
Same as plasma. Same as plasma.
Same as plasma.
If you take 140 as the plasma level,
yes,
then
sir.
400, you lost
400,
56 or 60 millimole of sodium. Agree?
Yes, sir.
And in the rice tube, 400 ml. What is the sodium
ml.
containing gastric juice? Sodium containing gastric juice? It is 60 millimole.
60 millimole, sir.
Liter.
So,
per liter.
So, yes, sir.
So,
per liter. So 400 ml, sir.
Around about 25.
Yes, sir.
25 ml of
25 ml.
Sodium. So 56 so and 25 80. Comes around 80.
85, sir.
So 85.
80.
So now you have the maintenance sodium, which is about 120.
120 plus 80, sir.
That means you need about 210 millimole of sodium. That is very important. You just cannot blindly write 2:1, 1:1. There is no formula like that. So now you have calculated that this patient needs about 210 millimole of sodium. You have calculated that if you give 1 liter normal saline, that will be 154.
150.
And if you give the patient another bottle, it will be another 75. So it comes from 225. So 10 ml is acceptable. 10 millimole is acceptable.
Yes,
so
sir.
This patient will calculate that this patient will need about 1 liter normal saline plus another 500 normal saline. Yes, so that is the ration for sodium.
Yes, sir.
Potassium is not giving in this immediate post-op period. And same concept of 100 grams of dextrose to supply 4 kilocalories of energies persisting in this period.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is what you write in the immediate first post-op period.
Yes, sir.
This will change. This patient may not be giving normal diet in second or third post-op day. Then the regime will change. And that will be based on number of factors. What are the factors you take into consideration when you get the late post-op period? Late post-op period means beyond 2 or 3 days.
Yes, sir. We will, according to the lab report, we have to add other electrolyte disbalancer like potassium. Then we will have to have some nutrition for the patient, sir. If the patient is not having any food for any enteral feed for more than 5 days, sir.
Okay, we keep to this part. Okay, we have discussed about the pre-op, intra-op, and the post-op fluid management. That is the principle of fluid management. Okay.
Okay, Dr. Chatterjee, when to give
Dr. Maiti, have any comment? Dr. Maiti?
Yes, sir.
No, it is going on very nice. So, along with the biochemical measurement, the clinician should also note the clinical features. So, the signs of clinical signs of hypokalemia and hyponatremia, those should also be noted. For example, hypokalemia is not a problem in the first 1 or 2 days, but after the 3rd day, the hypokalemia may be manifested in the form of severe prostration, means drowsy, patient may be very drowsy. So that clinical feature is to be remembered. And another sign of hyponatremia is also dizziness and sometimes your convulsion. That features should also be kept in mind. So biochemical parameters by laboratory investigation is important. At the same time, the clinical features are to be also given some stress. Okay, that comment I like to make.
Okay, there is a question from the audience that if the patient is diabetic, yes, that is a consideration. Keep in mind that a diabetic patient is like any other patient, except that he has got some insulin deficiency. Okay, so don't go with the idea, don't go away with the idea that he cannot give dextrose for diabetic patient. Yes. The same diabetic patient needs the basic amount of calorie required, and you have to supply this calorie to the diabetic patient also. But point is, in diabetic patient, once you prescribe dextrose, you have to titrate the dextrose by giving adequate amount of insulin and potassium. Because if you are not giving potassium in this patient insulin, it will cause hypokalemia. So it is not that you cannot give dextrose to diabetic patient. Diabetic patient can be well given this dextrose. And the concept of half-strength ring-related half-strength dextrose comes when you have to balance the electrolyte requirement. So if the calculation is not coming up, you can give the patient half-strength dextrose with naloxone. But in our practice, most I don't give this half-strength saline. So you are getting the saline, but the important part in consideration is to keep in mind the calculation of volume, number one, calculation of each of these electrolyte concentrations required, and then you prescribe. And you have to always keep in mind that in immediate post-op period, you have to give the patient basic calorie requirement and the replacement of the electrolytes. So that is how you plan for the post-op fluid management. And Dr. Raman, if you have the operative scenario, what is the operative scenario?
Okay, sir, one just question on when do you consider a blood transfusion?
Yeah.
Sir, depending upon the hemoglobin status of the patient, sir.
Now, talk of intra-op. Intra-op, the anesthetist is replacing fluid. Na? When the anesthetist will start giving blood in the intra-op period, what is the principle of blood transfusion?
Sir, when there is excess blood loss in the, there is a large amount of blood loss in the during the operative period, sir.
You are doing a D2 gastrectomy. Some blood loss is expected. You are doing a D2 gastrectomy, but very good surgeon will not have a lot of blood loss, but there is some amount of blood loss. So what is the principle of blood replacement during surgery? If you go by norms, the ideal replacement for blood is blood. Clear? So whatever amount is lost in the surgery, you can replace with blood. But up to 15% of loss can be managed with crystalloids. If the patient hemoglobin was in the normal range. If the patient has a normal hemoglobin range, up to 15% loss in the intra period can be managed with crystalloids. And in that case, the ratio for crystalloids should be 1:3. If you now calculate, you have a loss of about 300 ml of blood, you can replace with 900 ml of crystalloids. Ramanuj, what's the
exactly? Absolutely, sir. The important point is to understand both intraoperatively and postoperatively what is the percentage of the blood loss that has been done. Okay, see the logic, the point is very straight. The normal human adult contains about 60 ml per kg body weight blood. Now talk to your anesthesiologist, what has been the volume of blood that has been lost from the patient. Now, how does the anesthesiologist measure the blood loss is not today's discussion. But say, for example, your blood loss has been 500 ml. Now, 500 ml for a 70 kg man is less than 10%, is not a problem. You do not need a blood transfusion. But if the patient's body weight is not 70 kg, but 40 kg, then 500 ml blood loss in that group of patients will be somewhere between 10 to 20%. And remember, may need a blood transfusion, particularly if there are signs of severe pallor, if there is an inordinate tachycardia. Remember, the rule is less than 10%, you do not need blood. More than 20% of blood loss, you always need a blood transfusion. 10 to 20%, you need to taper your decision based on clinics. Okay, so this is your intra and post-op.
Raman, we finish up the discussion with two important things. One is, Dr. Raman has already asked you a question. What do you mean by zero balance fluid therapy and number two is what is goal-directed fluid therapy. There are two concepts coming up. Zero balance fluid therapy is you calculate the output, and based on the output, you have replaced this total output. That means zero. Patient is not in positive balance. That is zero balance fluid therapy. What is goal-directed fluid therapy? Patient is in intensive care unit. You have loss of invasive monitoring. You have CBP. You have pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. You can calculate the cardiac output, cardiac index. So if you are planning your fluid therapy based on these parameters, that means you give the patient fluid so that your CBP is normal range, pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is normal range, cardiac index is normal. That means you are rationing the fluid based on these parameters. This is known as goal-directed fluid therapy. Keep in mind these two terms. These two terms are different. Zero balance fluid therapy is you are replacing exactly what has been lost. That is zero balance fluid therapy. In the immediate posterior period on the afterwards, you will not find the patient got a positive balance. And goal-directed fluid therapy is based on the patient important parameters. Cardiac output has become less. You increase the fluid ration. If I come to the normal. So again, go back to the maintenance part. So goal-directed fluid therapy is you maintain the patient on important parameters and replace fluid based on these parameters coming to normal. Okay. So
Professor Saha,
yes.
I want to also make another comment. So other than the fluid and electrolytes, when the patient is getting IV fluid, is on IV fluid for more than 3 days, then we should also think about the replacement of amino acids.
Yes. Actually, we have not gone to that. We have a separate discussion.
If beyond 7 days, we also supplement the fatty acids.
We will make a nutritional management in one patient. That's why we have not touched this part. We have confined mainly to the fluid management. We will have a scenario next day where we will discuss about the nutrition management, pre-op and then post-op nutrition management. Dr. Acharji, any comment? Dr. Acharji, any comment? Okay, Ramanuj, we have a operative scenario. Dr. Ranadeep will take us through the operative management steps of operation of D2 gastrectomy. Ranadeep.
Okay, Ranadeep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So after proper pre-operative management of the patient, and after taking the proper consent for the operation, the patient was taken to OT. After the patient was put to general anesthesia, and the proper antiseptic dressing and draping, the incision is made from the xiphisternum to midway between the umbilicus and the symphysis pubis. Then along this incision, the subcutaneous fat and is dissected, and linea alba is also incised in the same manner. Then the fascia transversalis along with the parietal peritoneum is held between the two hemostatic forceps, and a nick is made, and the incision of the parietal peritoneum is done along the line of incision. Then first we have to explore the abdominal cavity for any metastasis, which gives if there is a metastasis, it is an incurable disease, and we will go for the palliative surgery, not for the curative surgery, and which also for the any peritoneal mets. Then we will assess the tumor size, position, and location. If it is and its local invasion to other organs. Then we will after seeing all these things, we will go for the we'll start the surgery. We will first separate the greater omentum from the duodenum, and it's a sharp dissection, and we will coagulate all the small bleeding vessels, and after that we will incise the anterior layer of the transverse mesocolon, and we will strip it up to the anterior surface of the pancreas. After that, we will ligate the right gastroduodenal epiploic artery, and we will also lift the stomach, and we will also ligate the left gastroduodenal epiploic artery. After that, we will lift the stomach and plan for the proximal margin of the dissection of the tumor. If the short gastric artery needed to be ligated, then it is done. Then we will go for the lesser omentum. Lesser omentum, its gastrohepatic ligament is dissected, and the right gastric artery is ligated at its origin. After that, the gastroduodenal of the ligament or the lesser omentum is dissected, and after the ligation of the right gastroepiploic artery and gastroduodenal epiploic artery and the right gastric artery, the duodenum is cauterized, and the duodenum and the distal margin of the dissection is marked, and between two soft gastric clamp, the duodenum is cut, and the cut end of the duodenum, distal cut end of the duodenum, is either sutured with 3,0 polygalactin and 3,0 mark silk, or it is stapled with a linear stapler. And after that, we will clear the lymph nodes of the supra and infrapyrotic region. Then we lift the stomach and we'll clear the lymph nodes of the gastric bed, and we will also clear the lymph nodes around the splenic artery and the splenic hilum. After that, two soft clamps are applied. 2 pairs of soft clamps are applied in the proximal margin, and the stomach is cut, and it is sutured from the lesser cup to the greater cup. Then jejunum is put bring proximally in a retrocolic fashion, and a loop is created with the gastrojejunostomy, and distal jejunostomy is done. After that, a drain is placed in the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, and after proper washing of the peritoneal cavity, we will suture the abdominal muscles in layer.
Okay, Ronodeep, tell me.
This is a D2 gastrectomy. There are certain stations of lymph node to be cleared, sir. Which
that is something that we are coming down to. Okay, so let us very quickly take you down through a few questions, because it is already 9:39, so definitely we have crossed the time. So let us come to a few focused questions. Now, what do you mean by the term D2 gastrectomy?
Sir, by the term D2 gastrectomy means that we have to clear the second tier of lymph nodes, which includes perigastric lymph nodes and the lymph nodes around the major arterial trunk.
Okay, so this was the older part of the definition, is still valid now. The better answer is, sir, according to the Japanese Gastric Cancer Society, a removal of the particular designated nodes which you are going to come is called as a D2 gastrectomy. As you have said, perigastric along with nodes along the named arteries is technically a D2 gastrectomy. Number 2, when is a D2 gastrectomy done? In what condition do you do a D2 gastrectomy?
Sir, we will do a D2 gastrectomy in curable gastric cancer.
Curable gastric cancer. There is no term like that, sir.
Curative, that can be dissected, sir.
Exactly. Say that, sir, I will plan a D2 gastrectomy in a resectable
Resectable
gastric cancer. But particularly remember that either it is localized to the stomach or it could be locally advanced with involvement of the perigastric node.
Yes, sir.
So this is the indication of doing a D2 lymphadenectomy in addition to a gastrectomy.
Yes.
So remember that D2 is not the terminology of a gastrectomy.
No, sir.
Gastrectomy, it can be a distal radical or a total gastrectomy.
Yes.
D2, D1, D1 alpha, D0 are terms for removal of lymph nodes.
Lymph nodes.
Okay, so we have now combined the term D2 and gastrectomy together, but in a reality, gastrectomy is distal radical and D2 is a lymphadenectomy. Now quickly, distal radical gastrectomy. What is the proximal limit of cutting or resection? What is the distal limit of resection?
Sir, the 5 centimeter clear margin from the margin of the tumor, both proximally and distally, we have to keep.
Wait, it is not 5, sir, it is 6 centimeter proximal margin of the tumor that takes usually the distal half, at least half of the stomach. That is the definition of a distal gastrectomy. What is the distal margin? The distal margin is not 5 centimeter or 6 centimeter. It is usually the first part of the duodenum. The length of duodenum is 5 centimeter. We take the first 2.5 centimeters of the duodenum. Remember, you have to keep the next 2.5 centimeters of the duodenum to close the duodenal stomach. So if the tumor is situated in the antrum, your 5 to 6 centimeter will be technically the second part of duodenum. You do not take up to the second part of duodenum. Your resection stapler line or transection line, whatever you have done, is the first 2.5 centimeter. Okay. So please understand that. That is the resection principle of a distal gastrectomy. Radical means, now tell me, what are the structures that come out in your specimen apart from the stomach?
Sir, in radical, sir.
Yes, you are doing it for a cancer.
The stomach, then all the stations of lymph node, along with the spleen, with distal. In radical gastrectomy, it is mentioned spleen and with tail of the pancreas.
No.
Sir, you are 20 years back in time, sir. Okay, so please come in the present era.
But presently it is not done, sir. Now spleen and pancreas are preserved.
Come on, man. So again, as I've told you again, so unnecessarily, why do you want to delve into things which are not done now? Talk about the standard of care. What is taken out?
So stomach, greater omentum, lesser omentum, along with all the lymph nodes mentioned in the D2.
Lesser omentum is taken out in your specimen?
Sir, not.
Then?
No, sir. Greater omentum along with the lymph nodes, sir. D2 tier of lymph nodes, sir.
Okay. Why did you take out the greater omentum in the specimen? Because it contains which station of nodes?
Sir, subpyrotic and suprapyrotic.
Which station of nodes? It contains the four station. Four. A, B, C, D. Which one?
4, sir. 4SB.
4SB. Okay. So that means the greater omentum contains branches from the gastroepiploic artery. Greater omentum contains nodes which are 4SB, which drain technically into the left and the right gastroepiploic artery. So it is a standard practice to remove.
Okay, Raman, we are running out of time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. The one thing is I like to mention for the residents, when you have a patient of some description of large operations like APR, Whipple's, gastrectomy, try to make salient points. The way you describe is a clear description of few lines in paragraphs. So I prefer that you divide the operation states like this. You have given through the anesthesia position of patient that is done. Next is incision. Under the heading of incision, you describe what you have cut through, number one. Next is exploration of the abdomen to assess any distant metastasis, ascites. Next is exploration of the abdomen to assess resectability of the tumor. Next is division of greater omentum and the superior transverse mesocolon. Next is division of right gastroiliac vessels, division of lesser omentum and division of right gastric artery. Once you have done that, the next step is division of duodenum. I am making salient points, and under this heading you describe how to go about that. Next is division of left gastric artery and short gastric vessel depending on the proximal line of dissection. Division of left gastric artery. Dissection of lymph nodes will be the next heading. Some perigastric node will come along with the specimen. Apart from this, you need to take about nodes around the celiac trunk, nodes around the left gastric artery, nodes on the splenic artery, nodes in the splenic hilum. And then division, proximal division of the stomach, 6 centimeters from the proximal margin of the tumor. Next is creation of a Roux loop. Describe how do you create a Roux loop. Then gastrojejunal anastomosis. Describe how to do it. So what I'm saying is try to describe the operative steps in the salient steps. And under these salient steps, you describe the what you do. Okay, so you are 9:45. You have to wind up.
Right.
Thank you, Ramanuj. Thank you very much
sir.
for the nice discussion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any other last minute comment from anyone else? Dr. Acharji, Dr. Bashar, Dr. Maiti?
Actually, time is very less,
Yeah.
but excellent coverage, particularly of the fluid balance, post-operative fluid balance. Very lucid and most important points have been covered. I think there are lots of books on fluid and electrolytes balance in a surgical patient. One book I want to suggest right now is RCS course manual. It's a short, precise, and gives very good idea about the whole fluid balance, the nature of the fluid distribution in the body, the electrolytes, etc. So I think every student of DNB and MS should read that chapter at least. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely well said, sir. That RCS course manual, absolutely. It is a very simple, crisp, and for everyone. Absolutely, sir.
Dr. Maiti, last minute comment?
No comment. There were no comment. Excellent discussion. Thank you. And Dr. Ramanuj and Dr. Onadi, RCS manual is available everywhere. How it can be, how the students can get?
Sir, RCS course manual, no sir, it is not available everywhere. Sir, so particularly then, sir, you have to...
Ramanuj will give a copy.
Sir, I will give you a copy, sir.
If it is available, you can post in the group so that the students can get.
Okay, sir. Sir, only just one small request to the presenters.
Yeah.
Particularly if you are, as Professor Shah has said, see, operative steps discussion to a surgeon is probably the most important thing that the examiner may be waiting for. Particularly MS students, you have 100 marks in your operative chat. So someone who is describing the next operative discussion, please make a few slide PowerPoint. Okay, so it becomes, so particularly for MS students, remember that you have 100 marks in operative, and particularly with the long case, an operative surgery is something that an MS examiner is asking the MS candidate. So we all will like to discuss about the steps of operation. As Professor Shah has said, exactly those crisp points need to be put in. With this, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. We meet on Tuesday with the case presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good night.
Thank you.